with every power under my control to invite our valedictory to come and give us what she knows best to do. You're welcome.
Professors, distinguished colleagues in the academia, great students, yes, sir. Please forgive me for that error in protocol. Yes, sir. You are all welcome. And I want to thank everybody who is here. I want to thank all the members of my family for being here today. I dedicate this lecture to the memory of Professor Monora Oduduwa. In the form of preamble, I want to say this. In the 60s, when my senior sister gained admission into the university, some of our neighbors took it upon themselves to advise my father not to waste his money on a girl. Thank God my father knew better. Today my sister is one of the first crop of pharmacists in Nigeria from this great city, the campus state. My own mother was extremely intelligent, would never forgive her uncle for advising her father to withdraw her from school. Why? Because she was only a girl. If she had not had her education completed, she would have become a professor of maths or economics or any of the mathematical related subjects. One day I was at Ile-Ife, and one funny driver was trying to edge me out of my lane. And I showed him that I learned driving in Lagos. And as that happened, another colleague of his laughed and said, "Obìnrin lásán lásán ló ń gbé eléyìí." In other words, an inconsequential woman is doing this to me. On another occasion, I know of a woman who had issues in her matrimonial home, and she was automatically demonized. She was the guilty party. Nobody tried to listen to her own side of the story. Why? Because women are evil. Only ọkùnrin tí ò tí ìyàwó rẹ̀ ní ò tí pa. In other words, a man is alive as long as the wife has not decided to kill him. And as long as this type of thing continues, we continue to have problems in social transformation. And for the sake of the synergies of this world, feminist advocacy must not stop. Thank you. I would like to start this lecture by elucidating some major concepts in the topic. The first, Francophone Africa, refers to French-speaking nations of Black Africa, and they include countries like Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Republic of Guinea, Togo, Cameroon, Gabon, Mali, and others. The second, transformation, is used in the sense of social, economic, scientific, technological, and cultural development of a society. in a way that galvanizes the people, makes life meaningful, and provides an enabling environment where everyone can maximize his or her potentials. This presupposes the existence of a political system built on the principles of justice and equity. So social transformation, from my perspective, is the change of a society from an unacceptable state to an acceptable one. Culture, education, and the family are germane to social transformation. And I want to highlight the family. I focus on the family in particular because it is the nexus of children's socialization, the focal point of practical and emotional support for its members, and it provides them with social identity. Social transformation is about development, and I have articulated elsewhere what development signifies for me. Development is the gradual growth of society until it becomes advanced, and this advancement is attested to by many industries and a complex economic system. It encapsulates social transformation that is capable of ameliorating the lives of the people, since society cannot be divorced from its citizenry. My understanding, therefore, of development underscores the improvement of the capacity of the individual. It means maximizing his or her potentials, intellectual and otherwise. It means access to good nutrition, education, good medical care, and other basic amenities which enhance quality and ensure emotional and mental stability of the individual. It means creating an enabling environment for him or her to contribute to the growth of his or her society, and indeed to social transformation. It means ensuring an atmosphere where children can grow with all their faculties fully developed, irrespective of their sex. It means critically revisiting traditions and social norms in order to identify and expunge those that infringe on the human rights of the people, especially the rights of women and by extension the girl child, who are the downtrodden in African society, Bestman 2016. From the above, the ideology that underpins this discourse is obviously feminism. And feminism, succinctly put, is the philosophy that advocates social, political, economic, and cultural equality of the sexes. Feminists posit that if this philosophy is embraced as a worldview, especially in Africa, social transformation will be assured. And such a transformation is the target of Francophone female novelists as they problematize the African woman. In African feminist epistemology, Nigeria's Molara Oduduwa, poet, teacher, critic, essayist, theorist, and activist, founding member of such women's associations as Women in Nigeria and Award Association of African Women for Research and Development. It's a strong and passionate force in advocating social transformation in Africa. She unequivocally believes that Africa is in dear need of social transformation, or such a transformation will continue to be a mirage as long as women continue to be oppressed and marginalized. She enunciates the Afrocentric feminist theory of social transformation, including women in Africa, Chiwanism, as a critical tool for analyzing the condition of the African woman. Oduduwa theorizes that there are 6 metaphorical mountains on the back of the African woman, hindering her emancipation. They are the mountains of oppression from foreign intrusions, comprising of colonization, neo-colonization, Christianity, and Islam. The second is the heritage of tradition. The third, the backwardness of the woman. The fourth is men. The fifth is her race. And the sixth, the woman herself. Oduduwa also posits that a female writer should be committed along 3 lines: as a writer, as a third world citizen, as an artist. Another Nigerian scholar, Chikwanyo Okonjo-Ogunyemi, proposes humanism as a community-driven, mother-centered ideology to generate a sophisticated reading of African women's texts. She foregrounds the ideology and the positive African phenomenon of motherhood, which transcends biological procreation to include social, spiritual, communal, national, and international mothering. In place of the traditional gender quarrel, Ogunjemi proposes a dialogue and entente encapsulated by 4 C's: conciliation, collaboration, consensus, and complementarity. Literature and society. Literature has been defined separately by experts in the field. But for the purposes of this lecture, suffice it to say that literature is creativity. It is the creation of a universe springing out of the realm of the writer's imaginary. It is the intricate weaving of strands of ideas and characters into time and space through the harmonious arrangement of signifiers and aesthetic devices to produce orderliness and a tapestry of delight and instruction, relevant in all climes and at all times. It is the writer creating a universe akin to real life through the power of her word. The writer, in a piece of her imaginary, develops the tool of deploys the tool of the written word to express the density of ideas, the complexity of human emotions, as well as myriads of man's challenges with his fellow men and his environment in time and space. Literature comes from man and speaks of man in his essence, and every literary work reflects the philosophy, morals, worldview, and values and ethics of the society of its setting. Indeed, literary works have been considered reliable anthropological documents through which societies have been studied. For instance, Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, which we all know, affords the reader the opportunity to take a leap back in time to witness both the saga of the first foreign intrusion into what was hitherto a well-structured Igbo society. Art in the African society is functional. The notion of art for its own sake is at variance with what obtains in Africa. Abiola Ibile states that all forms of artistic expression, and most especially literature, must have reference to life and consciousness if they are to take on significance. Achebe, in his characteristic proverbial language, says our literature must show us where we have been beaten by the rain. African literature is an offspring of a traumatic experience with the West. It took up as a vehicle of protest against Western imperialism. Later became an expression of the disillusionment of the post-independence era and has gradually mirrored the existential problems of the African people. It is deeply anchored in the bloody history of the continent, and African writers, as conscious and educators of the people, see themselves under the obligation to tell the African story. Their works bear the stamp of literature engagement. As George Orwell rightly puts it, a novelist is not obliged to write directly about contemporary history, but a novelist who simply disregards the major public events of the moment is an idiot. And African writers over time have demonstrated the umbilical cord that binds fictional writing to the history of their nations and the continent as a whole. Literature is a powerful instrument of awakening the conscience of the public, and that explains why some texts are censored and writers persecuted by authoritarian governments. When African women got hold of writing 5 decades after their main counterparts in Francophone Africa, their works began to show where the rain has beaten the African woman. Literature became, in the hands of the female writers, what it is their terms desire miraculous weapons. It became a weapon of challenging and resisting patriarchal dominance and oppression. They became the mouthpiece of their unlettered sisters. They could not be excused from the task of re-education and regeneration that must be done. In 1967. At first, these women were ambivalent about feminism, but later espoused the idea. When feminist consciousness began to gain ground in America in the 1970s, the voice of Black and African women, and indeed third-world women in general, was subsumed under that of the white woman. In reaction to this marginalization, African American female critics like Barbara Smith, Barbara Christian, Bell Hooks, Alice Walker, Deborah Constance Williams, and others began to theorize their own feminisms. Like their Black American sisters, African feminists saw the necessity of defining and naming their own feminisms. The consensus among these scholars was the imperative of feminist theories tailored to the reality of the Black woman. Categories such as racism, classism, sexism, and other cultural imperatives like the importance of motherhood, family-centeredness, female bonding, communal orientation, among others, which mediate the day-to-day realities of Black women were understood. African women began to highlight their own peculiar historical and cultural realities like colonization, neo-colonization, racism, polygamy, child labor, child and forced marriage, and other culture-specific challenges which are peculiar to African women. Nigerian feminists in particular have been very vocal in postulating and naming their own brands of African feminism to counter the racial and imperialistic tendencies of white feminism. As a Nigerian specialist of Francophone African literature with special interest in the works of female writers, my research has consisted mainly in studying the works of the latter through the prism of the theories enunciated by their Nigerian sisters. Consequently, most of my publications in this regard are in French, in order to serve as a bridge between the two and make the works of our very dynamic Nigerian female theories accessible to French-speaking scholars and researchers. Ogundipe's Christianism and Chinkwenye Okonjo-Iweal's humanism are the particular critical tools that I use as theoretical frame for most of my critical analysis of Francophone African writers' works. Here is a quick review of other theories by Nigerian women. Mary Awolowo theorized Afrocentric feminism as humanism. She posits essentially that women are not the enemies of men, but co-partners in the war against Western imperialism. Chioma Okpara's feminist philosophy is as integrative as it is conciliatory and productive. It emphasizes dialogue rather than strife. Feminism rejects feminist nihilism of the institution of marriage and attendant motherhood. Marie Pauline Ebo names her variant of African feminism as Gaianism. Her major contention is having to name and define woman in terms of man. Otherwise, she does not have much against the philosophy of humanism as well as Chioma Okpara's feminism. Obioma Nnaemeka proposes nego-feminism. Inherent in this are two principles: feminism of negotiation and no-ego feminism. Indeed, inscribed in nego-feminism are concerns for multi-perspectives, multidisciplinary, and intersections of difference. Akachi Adimora Ezeyi advances the snail sense feminism, which is akin to nego-feminism. She uses the snail as metaphor to propose a strategy of wisdom, negotiation, and patience in dealing with men. Oyeronke Oyewumi postulates the theory of Abiyam, underscoring motherhood and for grounding the spiritual, mental, and metaphysical bond between mother and child. Catherine Achulon openly names her theory motherism, the Afrocentric alternative to feminism. Achulon carries motherhood beyond the frontiers of biology to the level of the environment. She makes a case for mothering our environment, and this cannot be more relevant in the face of the current environmental degradation and pollution prevalent, especially in African communities. Even though the concept of African feminism by these women is classified, their ideas are closely related. Essentially, they all condemn sexism as an obstacle to women's emancipation. They are all against all forms of violence inflicted on the woman. They advocate equity and justice as well as cooperation and complementarity of the sexes. Indeed, all these theories have their strong and weak points. However, it is my view that humanism can be considered the synthesis of the ideologies because, generally speaking, it encompasses most of the elements in the various postulations. One major difference, however, is that dualism is Marxist-oriented. Francophone African female novelists writing social transformation, writing the home front. The place of the family in social transformation has already been noted. Francophone female writers have focused on the family to the extent that they have been accused of privatizing trivial domestic matters over and above more pressing national issues. Such critics seem to forget that charity must begin at home. Traditionally, the African family has been the dynamic force that has assured the survival of the race from the periods of slavery, slave trade, through colonization till date. While radical white feminists argue for the disintegration of the family system because they believe that the family is the main site of women's oppression, African women are particularly attached to their families and will do anything to safeguard them. This is the trend in the writings of Francophone African novelists as they depict the various aspects of family life: marriage, polygamy, children education, domestic violence, oppression of widows in lawyism, and different kinds of sexual assaults of the woman. Mariam Abaye, Sinlong, Anshari Kalat, Aminata Soufan, expert de la Nation, Regina Yao, et la repose d'Abiba, le prix de la report, Hadis Beyala, c'est le select Makoulé, qui s'appelle Graf Manga, Patrick Keita in Cobel, Patrick Diom in the Pont de l'Atlantique, and Marie Ajoke in B, Hypothèque, to name but a few, depicts different aspects of family life. Their works reveal that the disadvantages of polygamy far outweigh its advantages. Emotional abuse, poverty, jealousy, unhealthy rivalry, and diseases such as AIDS are some of the things he highlights. But more importantly, they show that polygamy is a flaw in the wheel of social transformation. One of the major impacts of polygamy on conjugal oppression of women that is often overlooked is mental instability in women, as depicted in cases of Jacqueline, in Osun, in Ray, in Osun, in Kalat, Jutan, in Jutan. Obviously, mental instability cannot enhance social transformation. However, as Francophone female writers depict these problems, they also propose solutions to them. They portray the revolt of female characters, both young and old, against these patriarchally imposed institutions and limitations. I started in Zealand, Apiba in Arigoda, Apiba, and the Prix de la Revolte, Manimuna in Rebel, examples of such characters. The very titles of some of these were La Revolte, Rebel, Revolt, meaning revolt, and rebel. The leading author's quest for a change in the status quo. Francophone female novelists also reveal that the traditional mother-daughter-in-law hostilities impact negatively on the well-being of the African woman and her family. Ogunyemi argues that the culture of African men deifying their mothers while demonizing their wives is responsible for this. Leonora Miano's of the Creole de la Nuit debunks the belief that polygamy is un-African, monogamy is un-African, by depicting a couple living in a rural setting where relationship is built on the principles of cooperation, consensus, conciliation, complementarity expounded by women. They make room for fluidity in gender roles and with conjugal harmony as a result. Ironically, women who have interiorized the patriarchal definition of the female gender are usually opposed to monogamous system. In the next mother-in-law, in favor of a creed farm, says of her, who is this woman who spends her time advocating, I don't know what rights, as if she wants to change our traditions. That is precisely where Willie posits that the African woman herself is one of the metaphorical mountains hindering her own progress, and that the tradition must be critically interrogated in order to jettison those aspects and negate the settings of the woman. Ibiyemi Jola addresses this same issue in her paper, Women as Asked Men of Humanism in the Works of Francophone Female Novelists of West Africa. Ngambika helped me balance this load. The particular challenges of professional women in balancing the task of the private space with professional engagement in the public space is another area of thematic concern of Francophone African female authors. They make a case for the principle of Ngambika, a Chiluba word from Central Africa, which means help me balance this load. This means that certain gender assumptions need to be reviewed. In fact, Oduduwa contends that whitehood is a social construct. These social mutations have allowed women to become co-breadwinners with their spouses. By that same logic, men should lend a helping hand at home. This principle of cooperation is explored in novels like Sidon Led, Rebel, Laribota Fever. Some of these works reveal that most men see domestic work as demeaning. But as Chimamanda Ngozi rightly pointed out in an interview, the greatest chefs in the world are men, which buttresses Oduduwa's point that whitehood, which prescribes domestic work for the woman, is a social, cultural construct that needs revisiting. I procreate, therefore I am, writing biological infertility. Many critics think the theme of the biologically infertile woman is overrepresented by female writers. However, this insistence is only an indication that it is a sore point with women because childlessness is a great pretext for oppressing and dehumanizing women in many African societies. Ogunyemi postulating humanism as a mother-centered, community-oriented ideology consists of motherhood beyond the frontiers of biological procreation. She underscores the central role of the mother, not in the restricted sense, biological sense, but in the more encompassing sense to include spiritual and social motherhood. She posits, contrary to patriarchal worldview, that marriage and procreation are not the raison d'etre of a woman. Other community-oriented sides of mothering, social and spiritual, are equally healing and rewarding. For instance, female teachers, female doctors, nurses, women in managerial posts, government posts, or university professors like Folajoke are mothers in the public arena. When a woman is made a career because of childlessness, her capacity to contribute effectively to nation building will be impaired. It is also in this regard that Oduduwa argues that committed African female writers who channel their works towards communal well-being and social transformation are Ile-Ife's mothers in the public arena. Francophone female novelists as Ile-Ife's also inscribe Ile-Ife's in their texts. Emilienne in Pierrot, the Femme, Sissy in Comme de Mama in Mama and Mama are attest to this. These women start off as victims, but end up asserting themselves and finding their own realities. The position of the Francophone female writers of biological infertility, therefore, is revolutionary. Revolutionary in the sense of challenging the patriarchal notion of defining womanhood by procreation, Bestman 2012. Writing motherhood and maternity. The theme of woman motherhood is preponderant in African literature in general. Male writers depict mothers and motherhood from different perspectives. Senghor and the negative writers project the image of the mother in terms of the African motherland. As in the classical poem, Pamela, Samuel Usman, the advocate of the inclusion of women in social transformation in Africa, usually gives very positive roles to women and mothers in his work, as exemplified in Suleiman, Lamer, and Oduduwa. Kamala paints a picture of the exemplary mother in Osun. Mungobeti is not particularly interested in mothers as procreators, but as metaphors for Africa. His perception of motherhood has political undertone. such that his positive mothers are not necessarily biological or spiritual, as in the cases of Gwami Edige l'Ancien and Gwami Edige l'Ajoke, for the Rubenists to remember Ruben, and Louis Presto Lucas and Polichinelle, respectively. However, I contend that women writers are better placed to depict motherhood. Their representation is more authentic and more convincing for obvious reasons. The image of the mother in female literary imagination is diversified and does not always correspond to the sometimes exaggerated picture presented by male writers. Women writers tend to depict both sides of the coin: positive motherhood, negative motherhood. Bar represents three types of mothers in New Zealand, forcing them into early marriage for their own material gains, or by forcing them into prostitution for the same reasons. The works of Francophone female writers reveal a reconstruction of the stereotypes of mothers, a demystification of motherhood, and an exploration of different dimensions of motherhood. Their gaze is more realistic because motherhood for them is a life experience with its joys, challenges, conflicts, and contradictions, but never utopic. They problematize the tendency of some mothers to live off the bodies of their daughters due to economic constraints, and by so doing, these writers advocate an amelioration of the economic condition of the masses in order to stem the tragedy of mothers devouring their own daughters. Of self-definition. According to Oduduwa, the African women did not learn feminism from the West, even though the way it is given expression now, and the necessity to articulate African variants of it stem from our contact with the West. However, humanism and Judaism do not deny the oppression of the African woman, but they do challenge the image of the African woman as a passive victim of patriarchy, because history reveals her dynamic and sometimes very radical resistance to oppression. So humanism and Judaism underscore the strength and tenacity of the black woman in the face of oppression. Women like Kumba, in Aminata Sofa's Expert de la Nation, Sally in La Guerre des Battus, Ramantudai Aisatu and Gaba in Usidon Air, Miriam in Alice Biala's Mama and Mama, Sissy and Panta, in Mariam and Joyce, Tom the Bomber, Ida and the protagonist in Tanela Police, Martin de Kupropo, Afiba in Regina Yaos, La Report d'Afiba and the Prix de la Report, Marimuna and Condora, in Paticators, Rebel, and female characters who assume self-definition and self-affirmation. They resist domestic violence, noxious traditions like deliberate marriage, caste system, female genital mutilation, and the objectification of the woman in general. Bestman 2016. Female writers cultivating their art. According to Rukayat, a female writer must be committed at 3 levels: as a woman, as a third-world citizen, and as an artist. As a woman, she must tell the truth about what it means to be a woman in relation to sexism. As a citizen of the third world, she cannot be silent over the socio-economic issues of her society, because the global economic order affects our nation, and women are in fact the first to feel the impact of the shenanigans of institutions like IMF or World Bank on Africa. They know what it means, what it feels like when the children are hungry and expecting mama to give them food, whereas the posts are empty. Finally, the female writer must cultivate her art. It is not enough to have something to say. It is the how of the saying that makes it a work of art, what those of the Russian formalists would call the literality of the text. There is no doubt that Francophone Africa can boast of female writers of great talent. Maria Mahaba's epistolary style is very refreshing. Wherever it paints the exterior picture of Jean stand out among Francophone writers. Tanela Boli's dense philosophical style, Patugion's style, reminiscent of the artistry of the traditional African heroes, all attest to the mastery of the art of composition by these authors. the prolific iconoclastic Cameroonian writer, Beyala's style cannot be ignored. She's deliberately subversive and scandalous in her choice of themes, characters, space, and language and narrative points of view. She leaves a definite imprint on the aesthetics of the novel in Francophone Africa. She's a very controversial author due to her erotic language, but she stands out as a writer who has greatly contributed to the dynamism of women's writing, as she unequivocally advocates women's emancipation and social transformation in the most unconventional way. Women at the intersection of race and gender. Racial commitment is one of the cardinal aspects of the womanist Chauvinist ideology. For Ogunyemi, a womanist will recognize that along with her consciousness of sexual issues, she must incorporate racial, cultural, national consciousness, economic and political considerations into her philosophy. Ogundipe on her part contends that for the African woman, her race is important, since the international economic order is divided along race and class lines, with the industrialized countries in the north of the North-South dialogue notably white. Race affects the economics and politics of the North-South interaction. Within Africa herself, race problems are basic to the understanding of the societies of Eastern and South Africa. Ken Google in her autobiography, Global focuses on the alienating effect of colonial education on the African woman. The novel and its sequence sound a praise, interrogate the dialectics of being woman and black in Europe. Google's protagonist has to contend with being inferiorized sexually and economically. But the publication of Google's, before the publication of Google's novels, there was a dearth of women's perspective on the racial question due to the late arrival of women on the African literary scene. This makes Google's work valuable documents for our collective memory, which is becoming more and more of a real phenomenon these days. Institutionnel on la neige by the Noir female writer Giselle Tongi also portrays the African woman at the intersection of race, class, and gender class. Aminata Sofa in the cell, Rukayat, Pananapoli in Matondo, Ubroko, Patrick Gion in the one to la Conti, and a host of other female writers have focused on the race question as it affects the colonial and post-colonial exploitation of Africa. Writing the public arena. The first generation of Francophone African writers were criticized for writing on family affairs, which were considered not as important as national issues. It is ironical that the situation of over half of the population was not considered as national issues, forgetting that the hand that rocks the cradle rules the nation. The truth, however, is that as far back as 1981, an author like Awolowo was already investigating social-political issues. However, male critics were silent on such work, not because they were substandard, but because they were seen as intrusion into what was considered an exclusive male domain. Francophone African female writers have certainly incorporated national and international issues in their philosophies. They have analyzed the situation of their countries in the light of the global economic systems in order to have a holistic view from which to prescribe strategies for positive social changes. For instance, Aminata Sofa in L'Esprit de la Nation recounts the odyssey of an African authoritarian president and his reminiscences in a bid to trace the genesis of his tyrannical rule, while in Orpeda Free is a warning on the pitfalls that engender authoritarianism and how to avoid them. Bestman 2013. Inscribing the woman's body. Ogundipe Leslie posits that feminism for her must include issues around the woman's body and calls for a critical evaluation of our tradition and cultures in order to eliminate those that endanger lives, especially the lives of women and girls who are usually the most affected. There is no doubt that patriarchy confiscates the body of the female body through institutions like marriage, which can either be forced marriage, child marriage, or deliberate marriage, genital mutilation, sexual abuse, production, and reproduction. Particulators illustrate the socialization of and confiscation of the woman's body by patriarchy. She focuses on excision, forced child marriage, rape, domestic battery, overpopulation, or she also proposes strategies for reappropriating the body. Such strategies include formal education for girls, adult education for later female adults, scientific information on the functioning of the female body in order to debunk myths and superstitions about female sexuality, sensitization of men, of religious organizations on the danger of practices like excision, and especially breaking the silence and taboo over the woman's body. I have asked some pertinent questions pertaining to the marginalization, physical, and emotional molestation of the girl child, because the girl child suffers a lot in Africa. So my questions are these. Must African societies continue to define life, well-being in the masculine? To what extent can a violated girl or woman contribute to national development? Is it not paradoxical that African states advocate advancement and yet keep half of their population psychologically and physically mutilated? Is it not high time that Africa harness the vital human resources constituted by her women for a national development? The place to start is to allow the girl child to be access to formal education up to whatever level she desires. If African societies are to develop indeed, then charity must begin at home with our children. As the most vulnerable members of our society, they need to be nurtured, protected, and given all the opportunity for wholesome development the day made of female. The sanctity of life must be respected, and our social ethics must be redefined humanely, so that we start seeing all human beings as humans. When our cultures and traditions begin to wear human humane face, then our project of development will be meaningful. Because development does not exist in a vacuum. It is about human beings and for the benefit of human beings, especially the girl child. Bestman 2016, Bestman 2018. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, having addressed the topic of this lecture, I feel obliged as a woman and a Nigerian to leave a word with this august audience on the need to re-socialize our children, our sons and men, if we are to achieve any meaningful transformation in our society. I therefore wish to do a brief critique of a song by our highly successful popular musician, Fela Kuti, and the song is Lady. I will be analyzing it within the womanist framework. I wish to recall briefly that Ogunyemi's womanist theory is inspired by Nigerian syndrome rooted in patriarchal word known as woman palava, signifying trouble for women who are considered to be quarrelsome, frivolous, childish, lacking in focus, seriousness, and intelligence. However, Ogunyemi goes beyond gender quarrel in enunciating her concept of humanism to propose what she terms wo/man palava, encapsulating the idea of compromise, cooperation, consensus, and complementarity of the sexes to counter traditional quarrel. Lady was released by MCA Records in 1972, at about the time when feminist consciousness began to gain ground in Nigeria. It is to be noted, however, that Fela's Lady is a satire on cultural alienation in the westernized African woman, with the westernized African woman serving as the trope for his critique of the post-colonial yoke of African governments and the colonial mentality of the people, Nigerians in particular. Yet, the gender issues raised in the song cannot be ignored. Being neither a musician or a musicologist, my interest is primarily on the lyrics and the ideology that informs it. At the same time, I do acknowledge that Fela was a prodigy in the Nigerian music, African musical scene. His political and social commitment set him apart from his peers. His versatility and dexterity with musical instruments, as well as the intellectual underpinnings of his musical productions, were phenomenal. He evolved a peculiar music genre of his own and charted a distinctive path of popular music in Nigeria. For these reasons, researchers are naturally inclined to concentrate on the professional and intellectual aspects of his artistic productions, leaving out what might be considered the less important aspect, the lyrics. However, I believe that Fela's lyrics, no matter how marginal they may seem to be, in the overall context of his work, always carry a cognate on the provocative message that is never lost from his audience. It is therefore the lyrics it is through the lyrics that the Fela legend, as the uncommon of popular music in Africa and the nemesis of dictatorship, got crystallized and defined. In spite of the highly compelling professionalism of his music, his artistic organization and instrumentalist competence, it is to the lyrics of Fela's music that one should draw attention if the quintessential Fela is not to be lost. In fact, the messages Fela passes across through his lyrics are usually enhanced by the captivating instrumentalization that accompanies them. For instance, the lyrics of Lady are preceded by a long display of beautiful instrumentalization that even women, including the present presenter before you, who are the butt of his criticism in the lyrics, easily got carried away. Fela was an opinion holder and he knew it. Suffice it to say that the messages conveyed through his lyrics stemmed out of his deep conviction for Fela was not one to do anything happy. The lyrics of Lady unequivocally reveal Fela's stance on gender issues. Lady opens with these words: if you call her woman, African woman, no go free. She go say, I be lady. If you call her woman, the African woman will not agree with you. She will say, I'm a lady. She will say, I'm a lady. I'm a lady. She will say, I am not a woman. She will say, I am a lady. She will say, market woman is woman. She will say, I'm a lady. African woman will disagree with you. She will say, I am a lady. In order to really comprehend Fela's discourse here, it is needful to elucidate three primordial notions in this song. The first is woman, the second is lady, and the third African woman, rendered African woman in Fela's sense. According to Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary, woman is an adult female woman. Female human beings in general. The same dictionary defines the second notion, Africa, as a person from Africa, especially Black Africa. This simple definition rules out women from the Maghreb and South Africa. So, an African woman is simply a black-skinned woman from Africa. This brings us to the third notion, which is lady. According to American Heritage Dictionary of English Language, a lady is a woman of high social standing or refinement, especially when viewed as well-mannered or dignified. A woman who is the head of a household, especially when spoken of or to in a polite way. Policy Dictionary gives the definition of lady as a woman regarded as having characteristics of good family and high social position, a polite name for a woman. Going by these definitions, it is clear that semantically being a lady is positive. However, all the three notions explained above are either used metaphorically or ironically by Fela in this song. Whereas lady is obviously used as a satirical mood for the Western-educated woman, his use of the terms woman and Africa is a bit more complex. Identifying the participants in the discussion going on in lady will shed some light on what the singer means by woman and African woman. In this song, the omniscient narrator is speaking directly to a character known as you, and the topic of their dialogue is African woman. The conspiratorial tone of the narrator's voice shows that he either shares the same view with his interlocutor on the subject of their conversation, or he's trying to convince or influence his dialoguist to share his opinion on that subject. You is the listener, the audience, and is of the same gender with the narrator. At the same time, the narrator and you is aggressive are the one and the same person. They are conceived as universal categories, which make the male the norm, the subject, and the female African woman the other, the object. She's been analyzed from the biased point of view of the subject. Looking at the chorus, I said that there is no doubt that Fela is voice for gender quarrel right from the beginning of the day. He engages in woman palava when he says, if you call a woman, African woman, don't be she go say I am lady. His immediate contention with the woman in question is that she just to say, in a context where docility and voicelessness are synonymous with being a woman. This is voicing where the singer expects her to remain silent. A list of vast masculinist label of her by daring to say, thereby asserting her self-rule. In stanza 3, Fela sings, Hola go dance, she go dance, lady dance. Hola to dance, she will dance, lady dance. In direct opposition to her, in the next time, it's another African woman. African woman go dance, she go dance, fire dance. So there are two African women characterized by the way they dance. One dances lady dance, the other dances fire dance. The former is ironically designated as African woman to deride her for acquiring Western education and values, and as such considered alienated. The latter is the correct African woman, to use a popular Nigerian name, because she dances fire dance. Fire dance is what confirms her authenticity and gets her the approval of the singer. Given that this song is presented as a satire and colonial mentality, it can be argued that Fela's African woman or fire dancer is the authentic representation and epitome of the unadulterated, culturally sensitive and correct African woman who is a role model of sorts in the cultural renaissance needed to construct a more functional and responsive post-colonial order in the continent. It will seem that Rukayat is criticizing Beijing for denying her African heritage, but that is only a camouflage. The real issue is not African identity or gender. The unvocalized message behind the smokescreen of advocating African consciousness, which is not lost to the listener, is that this woman is insubordinate woman and considers herself superior to the average, correct African woman who has been to school. The term lady used for her is lady with mockery. Fela complains that she refuses the nomenclature woman. It is pertinent, however, to explain the reason for this refusal and the gender politics involved. Fela's Yoruba people have a saying, which means greeting can be offensive depending on how it is said. The singer, you, man, is the caller. The call is lady. The name is woman. Note that woman in this context is not generic. Otherwise, the one so called would not have rejected it. After all, she cannot deny the fact of being female. The bone of contention here is not biology, but the politics of meaning. She refuses the appellation woman because she's able to decode the unverbalized stigmatization behind that nomenclature. She's aware that naming her woman emanates from the namer's patriarchal construction of woman as subservient and inferior to man. This is what he's actually rubbing in by condescendingly calling her woman. The palaver here, therefore, is not about biology or racial consciousness, but about definition. This is a question of refusing to be named by another because the one who names you defines you. Her rejection of that name is actually her affirmation that she's not born a woman and refuses to be socialized into one. Simone de Beauvoir. Fela knows that if he really finds the educated woman, he will really carry along sexist men, particularly men who are afraid of women of higher education than themselves. They see these women as threats to their age-long power and authority, and welcome any opportunity to humiliate them in a bid to cover up their fear, perhaps inferiority complex. They have no problem with the woman who dances fire dance, because she fits into the idea of woman as plaything and sexual object for man. Such fire dance, promoted by Fela, recalls the pornographic dance of his Alaska Republic years, which generated a lot of you and private descent Nigerians and responsible parents. Fela, by the way, was one of the first to introduce years of performing pornographic dancing to accompany popular music in Nigeria. Today, the Nigerian public is bombarded with pornography promoted by popular musicians and Nollywood artists. That is the unfortunate legacy of Fela in the Nigerian culture. It is on record that Fela in one fair swoop married his 27 fire dancers to stem the outcry of their parents. For him, the line between marriage, objectifying, and commoditizing the woman is very thin indeed. In Sansa 2, Fela continues, I want to tell you about Lady. I want to tell you about Lady. She goes say he equal to man. You will say she's the man equal. She goes say he get power like man. She goes say anything man do, individual. She will say she's equal to man. She will say she's as powerful as man. She will say she can do everything like that. All the crimes listed against it in this text, claiming equality with man, challenging patriarchal authority, seeking equal opportunities with man, are gender-related, not racial issues. Even though Fela gives the impression at the beginning of the song that he's dealing with racial cultural matters, he's only exploiting the racial sentiments of his listeners to suit his purpose. In the next stanza he sings, I never finish, I'm not yet through. He repeats this 5 times, deploying the technique of repetition to capture the attention and whet the appetite of his listeners to what he's about to say. She won't take cigar before anybody. She won't make the open door for her. She won't make the wash plate for her for kitchen. She won't salute man. She go sit down for share. She won't sit down for table before anybody. She won't take piece of meat before anybody. Translated, she wants to take cigarette before everybody. She wants you to open the door for her. She wants you to do the dishes without even eating. She sits on the chair while greeting a man. She wants to sit at table before everybody. She wants to take meat before everybody. As far as patriarchy is concerned, these are alarming and outrageous transgressions of the part of the woman. Lady transgresses the boundaries of femininity by wanting to take cigarettes, sit at table, help herself to eat before anybody. But who is anybody? Anybody? Nobody. Man, Fela condemns everybody to all intents and purposes is the man, and lady is the nobody. Man, Fela condemns lady for contravening social norms by not being satisfied with playing second fiddle. How more eccentric can one be? It is interesting that smoking tobacco or chewing its leaves is acceptable for both sexes in many traditional African societies. Yet in modern Africa, cigarette smoking by women is considered an outrageous infringement of the man's domain. Fela considers cigar as a symbol of masculine hegemony, which makes ladies smoking a signifier of the domestication of patriarchal authority, in the way as a woman greeting a man while sitting is a subversion of patriarchal prescriptions. In Yoruba society, it is a given that a woman kneels down to greet the elderly, but kneeling to greet a man in general, which Fela advocates, is a symbol of female abnegation. Lady breaks the rule by sitting down for share. Anything suggestive of the woman advocating her natural patriarchal assigned role because Fela's work. What he has to acknowledge is that social mutations in present times have changed the dynamics of family life and intergender relationships. Indeed, the woman still takes care of the home and does the cooking, even among middle-class couples. But the reality of the modern couple is that breadwinning is shared by both parties. If gender roles can change to the point of the woman going out to work like the man, what makes it so bad if the woman asks for a helping hand in the kitchen when overwhelmed with domestic chores? Why is it taboo for a woman to serve herself at table before the man if the occasion arises? After all, she does the cooking and contributes financially to the housekeeping. Could it be that Fela resents ladies' economic independence, a byproduct of her Western education? Or is it the case of the fear of lady emasculating man and thereby ceasing to be the underdog. An exploration of the binary position established by Fela between Lady and his correct African woman elucidates further his gender assertion. African woman will dance, she go dance, fire dance. She know a man, the master. African woman will dance, she will dance, fire dance. She knows her man is the master. She will cook for him. She will do anything he says. But lady is not like that. But lady know is so. Lady know is so. Lady now master. Lady is the master. The fire dance the correct African woman, know a man the master, and she will do anything he says. She is for Fela exemplary woman because she accepts the slave-master relationship where her emancipated sister refuses to be the man's beast of body, be the master. A role Fela considered the special reserve of men. Again, it's a question of power, of domination and subordination. Lady challenges patriarchal rule by wanting her opinion to count rather than do anything man says. It is clear that Fela frowns at female's definition, self-assertion, self-affirmation, and considers any attempt by the informed, emancipated woman to liberate herself from the stranglehold of patriarchy as a blow to manhood. His radical socio-political commitment notwithstanding, he fails to break out of a parochial, fossilized patriarchal mindset. The deep-seated gender bias is difficult to explain, given Fela's antecedents. His mother, Mrs. Ile-Ife, had Western education and was a pioneer feminist and political activist. In 1944, she founded the Awolowo Club in order to improve the condition of the women, focusing in particular on the market women. Yet, in Lady, Fela pits the education woman against her later sister, market woman. But his mother's Western education did not constitute an alienating force. It was rather deployed to promote the status of the other less privileged women in the society. She certainly does not fit into Fela's mode of authentic African woman who dances fire dance, half naked, and is the doormat of the lay master. Mattress, another song by Fela, which bears the same seal as Lady, encapsulates his gendered assertion of the woman. And this song, I find it very disturbing. Mattress, call out for me, name it for me, mattress. The thing where we sleep on top, the thing on top of which we sleep, call out for me. It be mat, where they cold for ground. I'll read the translation. If it's hard flat, hard on the back. If it's spring, bouncing as a ball, bouncy as a ball. If it's soft pushing, soft like wool. If it's mat, flat, spring, is pushing. Anything on top of which we sleep, name it for me. So when I say a woman is a mattress, I'm not lying. And this chorus will say, you are not lying, my friend. Here, Fela the misogynist hears his fans. No hiding behind using woman as prop or denouncing colonial mentality. His misogyny, wrapped up and carefully delivered in anti-colonialist, anti-imperialist, and Africanist ideological pretensions is clearly this is paradoxical because Fela made it clear that he enjoyed sex. Hear him. What attracted me to girls? Sex. I wanted to fuck them. I wanted a house where I could fuck and I had. Here the woman is completely objectified, seen primarily as a sex thing. It seems that the African Fela claims to defend so passionately is conjugated in the masculine. His conception of African womanhood is nothing short of gender colonization. In fact, in Lady, he constitutes himself into the mouthpiece of the patriarchal colonizer, man, singing the colonized woman from the master's point of view. Fela's Lady, from the feminist perspective, reveals that Lady was presented as a satire on colonial mentality using the educated woman as a star. But the discourse therein is taken with gender bias. Fela, even though a critic of political expression and an acclaimed crusader of democratic rule in post-colonial Africa, demonstrates gender discrimination and aim for female emancipation, which suggests the erasure of women or women from the nexus of power. One must, however, admire the dexterity shown by Fela, who, having a controversial, if not unattractive agenda to push, chooses to deliver it through what he knows is a more acceptable narrative, one driven by anti-imperialistic ideology, widely celebrated in his age. In my book titled Singing and Singing Back the Woman, I contend that the sexist attitude, like Fela's, do not augur well for societal progress, and submit that women artists should sing back the patriarchal colonizer as they shall have business. Obìnrin ni mo gbé lọ́lá. Recommendation. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, I have gone into all this to show us that it is not enough to talk in the abstract about the objectification of the woman, that under our very noses, in our various walks of life and everyday interactions, we are all dealing with preconceived notions about the woman, which cannot make for social transformation. Personally, my best music at the time when I was growing up as a young lady was Lady, and I danced it like no man's business until my eyes opened and I saw that this man was actually dealing with me. So, recommendations. I will recommend, therefore, that we revisit the socializing of our sons. We naturally teach girls how to behave, how to become good wives. But it is high time we start training and teaching our sons to be good men and good husbands, so that we will not have cases of women being killed by their husbands. I also want to suggest that we revisit our school curriculum. It is very sad in Africa, especially in Nigeria, that courses like history have been deleted, so imposed. We still teach them, but they have been so watered down, so adulterated, that our children don't know. I was alarmed in a class, I think it was part 2. I asked my class, I was to teach Caribbean literature, and I asked them, how did blacks, I brought the map of Caribbeans, how did blacks get there? They were looking at me. How did blacks get to America? It took them time, because I was okay, slave trade. If they don't know that, if collective memory is lost, how can we have any social transformation? Please, let us restore education. Let's revisit our curriculum. Then I want to suggest that we restore real literature to our curriculum. When we were in school, we read Chaucer, we read the Great Expectation, Charles Dickens, we read Chinua Achebe, we read Okara, we read Boogie, we read Shoyinka, and we were very sound. I don't know what's happening. I went with my niece to school to buy literature book, and what they brought, what was on the program was terrible. The English was bad. The thing is the type of thing that will make you retrogress intellectually. And these are the things we feed our children with. Please, if anyone is here who has a say in the way our curriculum has children's education, the way they are being orchestrated, we need a change in that direction. Finally, in conclusion, I ask, where are the mothers in Africa? Today, into intertextuality here, sir. By referring to the biblical figure, Deborah, in the 5th book of Judges of Israel, who rose up to the occasion where her land was under siege from alien forces and corruption in the polity. Here, she says, in the days of Shamga, son of Anna, in the days of Jael, the highways were deserted, and travelers have walked along the byways. Village life ceased. It ceased in Israel until I, Deborah, arose, a mother in Israel. The context of Deborah's arising some 6,000 years ago in Israel is similar to what obtains presently in Nigeria, and indeed in many African nations today. She arose a mother. From the story of this little female figure, we see an interconnectedness between being a mother and social transformation. The concept of motherhood in this story, as well as in context of this lecture, and feminist postulations transcend out of being a biological projector. Beyond biological motherhood and mothering at the home front, Deborah was a mother at the public arena. She mothered her community by arising to the challenge, confronting her nation. She encourages the commander of the army to launch an offensive against the enemy forces, and even had to physically go to the battlefront as an impetus to get the commander to take the plunge. And Mr. Lapidot, her husband, did not feel threatened. What is more, it was another woman who eventually nailed the enemy to the ground, literally. Deborah, as a mother in Israel, travailed and engendered social transformation in her nation. The story of this woman, to my mind, is an allegory of the feminist engagement in Africa. In conclusion, never marginalize girls and women, because there are many Deborahs inside them who are needed to wake up the barracks in order to achieve social transformation in Africa. This is the imperative of the female.